So, Harry, we've got an interesting future going forward with Doctor Who, and I think it's easy to say, oh, certain things shouldn't be continued, or certain things shouldn't be like put back at the forefront for a while at least.
Mm.
And when it comes to Gallifrey, it's always mixed right now because at least that's how I see it. I feel like ever since Gallifrey has been handled at points okay, at points terrible recently, especially in the Chibnall era, a lot of people feel like it would be best for the future of the show to not focus on Gallifrey going forward. And I can somewhat see where they're coming from, especially considering that when Who began back in 2005 when it was relaunched, Gallifrey was pretty much put on the back burner. It was pretty much the showrunners Russell T Russell T Davis. He didn't want it to be part of the lore. I vaguely recall him mentioning that it was because he found them boring, or might have just been because he wanted to make something interesting with the Doctor. By that point, the classic series they had become such a staple with the show that a lot of their mystery had been like stripped away, for lack of a better word. So what he did make sense, and as we've touched on before in some episodes, it was somewhat reintroduced in the 50th. Well, at least it had the potential to be properly reintroduced again. But now, again, because of the Chibnall era, that pretty much feels like, oh, Gallifrey's probably done for now. We probably never won't have to see it again, or would probably not have to. But I thought today would be an interesting discussion just to highlight what we think should happen with Gallifrey if it was to go forward, which I think it will in some form. It's just a matter of when. So, off the top of your head, do you have any interests or ideas that you could see them with Gallifrey in the forefront?
Well, yeah, because we've been the newest season is going to be season 14, and we haven't properly seen Gallifrey. Well, the whole up until now we've seen it like in a couple episodes with Peter Capaldi and some with David Tennant, and then the 50th. But apart from that, we haven't seen it properly. So I'd like to see it. Like, I'd like it to be a reoccurring planet that the Doctor goes to at some point, because I think now is like a good opportunity to do that, because we like new Who fans who like me who haven't really seen any of the classics don't know the dynamic of how Gallifrey worked. To us, it's just like that's the Doctor's homeworld that's been destroyed, and like that's all it's ever been, because we've never seen it before, and it was destroyed from Eccleston. So I would just like to see it like in its glory again. Well, whatever that is, if there is any glory, because the way it was described by Russell T Davies, even though you said that Russell T found it like boring as I guess the Gallifreyans, and when like the show is focusing on that, but the way he can describe it is really like wonderful, and it sounds amazing, and it sounds like the nicest place and the most magnificent sort of planet, and it'd be cool to see that actually for a whole episode, or for some episodes, not just like David Tennant just like talking about how beautiful Gallifrey is with like one this basic picture of what like the bubble city with like a Time Lord standing next to a cliff with some lovely music playing, because that's basically what we've seen of it, and then the rubbish that we got with Peter Capaldi. So yeah, I would just like to see it in the way that Russell T describes it, and I think now, because he's the head of the business again, I think he can. Well, he can do what he wants, and if you say he finds it boring, he might not do it at all. But I think now he could make it the amazing thing that he described back when David Tennant was the 10th Doctor, not the 14th Doctor.
Yeah, I feel like with how Russell quoted back then, that was like back during the relaunch of Doctor Who. So that was why he chose to make Gallifrey be destroyed, to make the Doctor interesting. Now, though, considering what's happened in universe with the story narrative, with the 50th, and as much as we don't like it, what ended up happening with the Jodie Whittaker era, I feel like I feel like we are owed at this point to see Gallifrey be given some resolution, and at the very least be a bit more featured in a storyline or several storylines that would put it to rest, for lack of a better word, in a satisfying way. Because I can guarantee you, had we not gone everything that happened in the Chibnall era, and had we gotten a storyline that spanned for the last few seasons of Capaldi's run, where he was like he returns to Gallifrey and such, and somewhat as I suggest here, if it was able to like resolve a lot of the questions that people have had about the planet and the people on it, and for the Doctor himself, I feel like we would be in a bit more of a positive place where we could have ended with the Doctor generally just, he's found his home, he's found his people, and now he knows they're safe. Now he can go off into the universe, knowing that his home's still there, but he knows it's not where his heart is, or like that's not where his call is.
Yeah, that sounds like perfect.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a direction I would have aimed for. So so for the life of me, I still don't understand why any of the showrunners decide to not consider that possibility.
Like I just thought of something when you were just saying there that would be a really cool concept, but I don't think would ever be done just because of it might not be popular. But I'd love it if an entire season, maybe from Peter Capaldi, instead of just finding Gallifrey one time, if like Gallifrey was like found after like a whole plot of Gallifrey being found, and then like the next season was Gallifrey, like maybe the Doctor seeing how corrupt Gallifrey actually is and how it was, and like systematically changing how how he sees Gallifrey and makes it better. And then, like you said, he can make it better and then sort of not be the head of Gallifrey, but like leave it better than he found it, and then go on, like you said, and leave it behind, but without abandoning it.
Hmm. Yeah, again, as said earlier, that's a direction I would strongly consider. And a lot of people might say, "Oh, that probably feels like too much of a like final season concept for Who, as if the show's ending." I would personally argue that that's perfectly within fitting of Doctor Who, where they have a storyline that somewhat seems like an ending, and then they just keep going, because they've done that before.
Yeah, because that's how Doctor Who works.
Yeah, it's all as the saying regeneration goes. It's all about rejuvenation and
Exactly.
restarting. So I could fully see them committing to that. But I would like to think concepts that I feel would be interesting for them to utilize Gallifrey, or at least partially involve it in with storylines, because we don't know what the storyline going forward with the next Doctor is going to be, of course. And based off the few filming photos that we know are out there, we haven't really been able to piece together a narrative yet.
What I'm hoping is that, and I think what everyone hopes is that when David Tennant comes in, he realizes it was all a dream, and Jodie Whittaker wasn't ever the Doctor, and nothing happened, and Gallifrey wasn't destroyed, so he can go back to Gallifrey without it being destroyed again.
Oh God, if only. I mean, you never know. The fact that in one of the teasers, I believe they do mention Gallifrey, so there's a possibility that could like factor into the 60th, but that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, I feel like we could. I've got a few story concepts here that I think could be quite fun for us to talk about, and also just like give everyone for ideas, I guess, in what I think would be cool for Gallifrey's involvement. And the first one is quite interesting in my opinion, because this one is actually not my idea. This is actually a concept that was pitched by another YouTuber, and I decided I wanted to highlight it because I think it's such a cool one. I feel like it deserves to be acknowledged. So this is a fun, not a theory, it's more of a fun concept by the YouTuber James Wilson, who is like, he's in charge of the Who Addicts, which is a Doctor Who YouTube channel which has been going since 2013. Great channel. Highly recommend it, especially if you're a Doctor Who fan. And he put out this concept earlier in the year, and he basically pitched it as the idea of Thanos as a villain in Doctor Who. So essentially, his basic concept was the
Josh Brolin.
Sorry.
I said, Josh Brolin.
Oh, yeah.
coming back. The actor, he reprising his role as Thanos in the Doctor Who universe.
No, that'd be too costly. But yeah, but James's basic concept approach, was that there's this figure within Gallifrey history, and he's known as the Overlord. And this was a legendary Time Lord figure who was around during the Dark Times, who went mad after he glimpsed the future and saw a devastating future, which was basically unleashed upon the universe by the Time Lords. And it's not, again, this is all from his pitch, it's not stated what this is, but it could be the Time War. It could be some other future foreseen event that has yet to happen in the series. But the basic approach is that this Time Lord sees this conflict, this terrible event, and it's to come, because of the Time Lords, his people. So, in his crazy mindset, he decides to dedicate the rest of his lives to wiping out Gallifrey and its people in order to purge the universe from their corruption and ensure a safe future. As the story goes, he was then stopped by the High Council and exiled from Gallifrey, with his identity and memories subsequently wiped. So that's James's pitch that he put out there, and I think that's such a cool concept. The idea that there's this Boogeyman-like figure within Time Lord history that every child on Gallifrey, at some point in their lives, grew up being told this story, or about this figure who you should always be wary of, because he's still out there. He could be still out there, and if he ever found out about you or met you, he wouldn't hesitate to kill you, because it's his philosophy of ensuring a better future. And I feel like that's such a cool concept, because not only would that be a cool concept that expands the lore of Doctor Who and Gallifrey, but it also means that that's a connection, a bit of a connection to the Doctor's past that could add a level for him. Because how would the Doctor feel about encountering this being that he had been told about for years and years when he was a kid? Never meet this person because this person, they are dangerous. And I think that's so amazing.
Maybe was it the Overlord? Maybe the Overlord was the Doctor the whole time, like the timeless child.
God damn you, Chibnall.
When you were pitching it, it does sounds kind of similar to, I think, is it Rusty in the Capaldi era, when there's like the Dalek who wants to kill all the other Daleks, sort of like similar to that, but with Time Lords. But yeah, it does sound like a cool like thing. Would this like character just be like a sort of normal humanoid type Time Lord, or will it be like some sort of monster hybrid? Not hybrid. Don't mention the hybrid. Some sort of monster Gallifreyan. How would that work?
James never really elaborated on that part of it. He just basically summarised it being a Time Lord who went mad. But I guess you could draw from that the idea that, or maybe he... I mean, again, we know regenerations are unpredictable, and Time Lords can appear as different races. So again, it really depends on how the storyline could go. They could easily play with it. I mean, again, hypothetically, if this was to be a future storyline in the show, and they wanted to be a bit more out there and crazy with the figure itself, not just being literally an actor in a cool Gallifreyan costume, they could maybe have it so that he becomes like, maybe there's some fault with his regeneration when he like reawakens, and when he reawakens his memories, and he ends up becoming like a physical hybrid of different races and amalgamations, becoming this monster-like creature.
Maybe so. This is completely irrelevant, but are Weeping Angels supposed to be Time Lords?
As far as we're aware, no. As far as we know, and at least I know, that's more of a popular fan theory that they're somewhat related to Gallifreyans, just because of the little name drop we get from Rassilon during the end of time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because I was thinking that maybe like it could be what the Weeping Angels look like when they're actually moving. Could be what this guy looks like. Because I always think that for some reason in my brain I've always thought the Weeping Angels would be red when they're moving because they turn to stone, but like when they're not stone they don't look like stone, they'll look like something else. and I always imagined it being red. Like I guess like the Time Lord, motif is usually something red or orange. So maybe it could be like because like the Time Lord outfits like these massive collars that look a bit like wings, and it could be like some sort of winged creature, or like like the collar or like the Weeping Angels, but red with the Gallifreyan symbols and something like that. I don't know why. When you were saying it, I just imagined that this guy wasn't a traditional like humanoid person. It would just be more like a creature that would look cool because we've already got a Time Lord villain, but to have a Time Lord villain with a bit of a twist, or like you said, like the regenerations could go wrong, like or how the Masters did in the classic series when he turned into like some sort of goo or whatever that was, with the weird like melty flesh thing. But yeah, it does sound like a really cool concept, and I think you would have to change it up from being like another, mad Time Lord, because that is very similar to the Master. So like a mad Time Lord who, something like who looks different completely, or who doesn't have regenerations because when they were reawakened, the madness corrupted their soul, and and they now can't regenerate, but they like have a extended lifespan or some shit like that. But it does sound like a cool concept.
It would definitely have to. I guess it really depends on the approach they want to go with, because this is just the backstory, I would say, of the concept. Because the hypothetical storyline would probably have to be, and this is me adding my little expansion here, I guess. This would have to be the Doctor stumbles across the figure, this figurehead, the Overlord, as their human prisoner. Like he's just this random guy he met on an adventure, and then through the story or through other external means, he ends up regaining his Time Lord memories, and he's like reawakened, and that's the moment the Doctor realizes who this is. And from there, that's where the storyline would go, where the Doctor has to basically stop him, or basically has to find him again to ensure that he doesn't, you know, continue with his mission and find Gallifrey and destroy it. Yeah, and yeah, I agree. I feel like if it's just another random Time Lord just hell bent on destroying Gallifrey, how many times has it been destroyed at this point? So it wouldn't exactly be like the most wow. Yeah. If anything, I think the biggest takeaway from this concept would be the fact that he has such a history within Gallifrey's culture and with the Doctor. That would be the more bigger draw for it. But as you said, if they do try and mix it up and make him more than a mere Time Lord, or more than just a guy in a suit, a guy in a Gallifreyan robe, I think that would add to the notoriety of this pitch.
I mean, when you said that, I just imagined, all of the like weapons that were described in the Time War, like the Nightmare Child and all this sort of stuff. If this concept, this like idea wasn't like a fairy tale from the Time Lord thing, but this was a Time Lord that went mad in the Time War. Like, that is so similar to Khan though. Never mind. But yeah, like a Time Lord that went mad because of like one of the weapons in the Time War, and then wanted to stop both the Time Lords and the Daleks or something like that. Then it would just be a bit different, because destroying Gallifrey has been done enough by the Master at one point.
So that's the first pitch, and I got to reiterate, I love this concept, and it's all thanks to James Wilson. He's the one who made this, not us. So if you want to see the original video of where he talked about this concept, I'll put it in the link in the description of the episode here today. So go and check that out. Give him a lot of love, because he's a great guy and he has a lot of fun discussions with Doctor Who. So yeah, that's the first one. On to the second one, and this is one that's all mine, and I have the previous episodes to back it up. And you might remember this, Harry, because we touched upon this in previous seasons when discussing Doctor Who. Now, would you like to read out the title for this one?
Sure. It is called The Renegades / The Search for Rassilon.
Yes. So, for those who don't remember the previous episodes, I pitched this concept that during the Time War, a squad of Time Lords were basically assembled by Rassilon from a young age to be assassins, and they worked for him personally. And during the war, they occasionally would work alongside the Doctor for certain missions, higher up missions, but and they wouldn't like him. They don't like the Doctor because the Doctor was all about stopping the war, basically ensuring the war would end. But for them, they were born in the war. This was their purpose for living, essentially, and so they never appreciated the Doctor's enthusiasm for ensuring the war's end because in their mind and at the time they felt the war would never end, and that was what their purpose was for, to fight till the end of time. Now, this pitch progresses where after Gallifrey is saved by the Doctor, they would go dormant for a brief time, depending how long it took between the events of Day of the Doctor and Hellbent on Gallifrey, at least. But after the 12th Doctor would come to Gallifrey and exile Rassilon, the squad desired retribution against the Doctor for basically, ruining everything and also now basically exiling their master, the one who gave them their purpose in the first place. So they would sort him out, only to find out he'd already left. So that is an entire storyline that could have happened concurrently with the 12th Doctor's era, but we never saw it. So, after this happened, these assassins would then exile themselves and take on the name the Renegades, and now make it their purpose to go out into the universe and find Rassilon, reuniting with their master so that they can ensure Gallifrey's survival with the man who they believe to be the one to do so.
Very cool. It's very cool. It's like a sort of like zealots, I think is the term, sort of like religiously motivated warriors, and I guess rather than being religion or spiritual, it would be like a sort of devotion to Rassilon. That's a very cool concept, and like similar to the last one, I can imagine that they wouldn't just be like traditional like space assassins, like when they get like a rifle and they're in spaceships. I think it would be because it's Time Lords. They can't always just have guns, even though the Time War was like spaceships and guns. I was like, no, they wouldn't. I don't think this. I mean, I don't know what you've thought for them, but I'd imagine them having some sort of like, even if it is some sort of projectile weapon, it won't be a gun. It'll be like is it Rassilon, his gauntlet in the End of Time? Yeah. Yes. Things that are similar to that, like traditional like medieval armor, but as like new futuristic weapons. It have to be some sort of concept like that. But that is a really cool idea. And I for some reason I can imagine them wearing like Time Lord inspired Jedi robes, or like the Jedi outfit that like Obi-Wan and Anakin wear in the prequels, like without the long cloaks, just like the sort of skirt type robe but in red and black or something like that. I always like want to put visuals to these sort of creations, so that's what I've pictured. But it's a very cool, I like it.
Thanks mate. Yeah.
And I can imagine also, just quickly, that they'll have similar things to like the Cult of Skaro, where they have because there's probably not going to be many of them, but they all have like really cool names, or like the Knights of Ren, where they have like the Renegades. They're called the Renegades, so it'd be like their name would be Renegade something or something Renegade. You know what I mean? Just things like that.
I definitely envision there to be like 3 or 4 members, and
yeah.
Again, and it's funny you say that. I never actually got to the point of theorizing what they would look like, but I do agree with the idea after you mentioned it that I would like them to be almost like a evil version of Guardians of the Galaxy, where you've got one or two humans, but you've got monster-esque figures within the group, likely because of regeneration, tampering, and such. And they wouldn't wear traditional robes and such. They would wear like battle armor and stuff, and they wouldn't have just weapons. They would have unique powers, not powers, but they would have unique, stuff like the gauntlets and maybe even abilities that are part of their body. Like maybe one can form knives or something.
Yeah.
And funny you said that about the weapons aspect. The person who gives them their weapons or created their weapons is something that actually ties into the next story pitch, which I'll get to in a sec. But the point, which could be a bit of connected tissue there, but we'll get to that. But yeah,
So
with
like
this
similar to Rassilon's gauntlet, maybe the person who made that would be the person who made their armor as well.
exactly. And yeah, this I feel like this entire concept was birthed just because I like the idea of there being a faction of Time Lords that basically go out into the universe trying to find a purpose that would basically be a big problem for the Doctor. Because again, up to this point in modern Who, anything related to the Time Lords, it's just been about the Master and a bit about with everything with the Time War during the RTD era. So this would definitely be something new, and that wouldn't resort to something like, oh, the meddling monk has returned and he's causing a bit of mischief. No, this is
Yeah.
about something completely new, but something completely old as well, because it's part of Gallifrey, but it's also something we've never seen before.
And I could definitely see this being like the death of a doctor, like this, because this seems like it'd be a bigger threat than usual, because it's like actual like a group of Time Lords going after the Doctor with Rassilon. So I could imagine that this would be how a Doctor regenerates, because that would give like them a bit more gravitas to actually kill a Doctor.
Yeah, I'm just picturing it now. The storyline kicks off with the Doctor basically being hunted by this team, and he eventually finds out what their purpose is, and he makes it his mission to stop them after they fail to kill him. The second time, like maybe the second season or of their appearance, they find Rassilon, and that's the season's big cliffhanger. And then in a third season, it's the Doctor versus the Rassilon and the Renegades, and he beats them. Maybe he exiles them again. Maybe he imprisons them in a pocket universe or something. But either way, he stops them then. But it results in his regeneration. I mean, that's like a trilogy of storylines right there that you could do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that one. Quite proud of that one. And now we can move to the next one. Unnatural creations across the universe. And I actually scribbled out the secondary title for this one to avoid spoiling you, mate. But
Yeah.
but you can
What's that?
I will get to it in the description portion of it.
Okay.
Because the figure behind this one is something you will likely be aware of, but probably again, like similar stuff from Classic Who, you probably don't know a big deal. So this storyline would go as follows: the Doctor and his companion encounter in both past and future events. So, short, basic summary. Basic picture this here. Basically, we've got a normal full season of Doctor Who where they're just going on adventures, but throughout the season they are encountering unnatural creatures from in the past, in the future, that are basically, and they're very hostile. They're very dangerous, and they've never been seen before in the universe. The been everywhere, he's seen it already, and he's never seen these creatures before, and he knows, just based on instinct and what they see from their encounters with them, that they are not naturally made. Someone created them. Someone with immense knowledge and power that rivals the Time Lords. And the big twist with this storyline is that the first season roughly would be like this pitch: find out who's creating these unnatural creatures that are causing havoc across the universe in all time periods. And in the season's penultimate episode, the Doctor would finally meet the person responsible. He would meet the Rani. So, mate,
Yeah, I know about the Rani. She was the one in the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Fred, not. Do you recollect the Rani at all, mate?
I recognise the name, but I don't really know much. I think the only thing I know is that she made Sylvester McCoy do a backflip. But apart from that, I don't really know anything about the Rani.
So, for a bit of backstory here, for those of you and Harry who don't know, the Rani is basically a renegade time lady who was a brilliant scientist, and her philosophy was that she saw everything, including morality, as secondary to her research. She was highly intelligent, extremely arrogant, a narcissist, ruthless, powerful, and insanely cruel. She was basically like the worst of the kind of person you could you could have as a colleague. And she was exiled from Gallifrey after one of her experiments basically escaped and ate the president's cat.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite funny, honestly. But in short summary, she's basically a Time Lord who was very smart, very scientifically brilliant, but she had no moral compass when it came to her research and her experiments. So she created, things, monsters, and such. And she actually teamed up with the Master for a period in several classic Who stories. She's notable for only appearing in two, essentially, but yeah, that's her backstory. And I believe also she actually did attend the Time Lord Academy with the Doctor. I can't remember if this is because I'm vaguely remembering this from my time looking up Doctor Who Wikipedia when I was in high school, and for all we know, that could have just been stuff made up, or that could have been stuff I made up. But I vaguely have the idea in my head that she and the Doctor were acquainted for a time, so they knew each other. They might have been friends or something. But either way, she's basically the same age as the Doctor, and she's had encounters with him before. So there's a bit of a history, but when you compare it to the likes of the Master and such, she's like not equal in that regard. But yeah, so that's her backstory. And with this storyline, continuing with the main concept here, so the Doctor finds out it's the Rani, and the backstory I've crafted for her here is that we discover that during her time in the Time War, she was tasked by the High Council and by Rassilon with creating experiments and weapons that were efficient in defeating the Daleks. And she did. She succeeded. She made monstrosities like weapons and creations that would ensure ultimate victory for the Time Lords. But it just so happened that the Daleks were equally smart, brilliant, and doing their own thing. So that's why the war would just continue to go back and forth with who would win, because each one was so efficient at creating destruction. But she,
Would there be a retcon for that? That, like, like I said before, like the Nightmare Child and all this stuff. Would there be and maybe even the Moment? Would there be a retcon that the Rani invented all of them, like the Moment
I
and
wouldn't say those.
all that? Because that would be a cool
Yeah, because
retcon.
I could see that, but I wouldn't suggest that because the Nightmare Child is something that officially was created by Davros, as far as we know. And
Oh, what about the
the
Moment?
moment itself, I can't recollect if that was created by a specific person, but I could definitely say the Rani could have had some involvement with that. But at the same time, I don't know. I kind of feel like that's something. If that was to be, if we ever do get more details on the origins of the Moment, I imagine it would probably be something. I don't know. I can't. I didn't envision her to be like the benefactor behind those specific weapons. I just knew for a fact that she would
Sure.
work. Because she specialized in genetics and such. So I could have imagined her creating weapons and creations that could be very hostile and vice versa, very efficient at harming Daleks. Because there's only so much gunfire
Like
can do.
Frankenstein, sort of. Yeah.
But basically, yeah, she and just a touch, and because you brought it up, I might as well just add on to it here, bit of a detour. But the Nightmare Child, I don't care what expanded canon says, but in my head, the Nightmare Child, it has to be this like cosmic, almost like Lovecraftian entity. It's got to be something that is just so massive and so terrifying that we can't just looking at it would be terrifying of itself. Because that screams Nightmare Child. Whereas, as I don't know if we mentioned this in a previous episode, or we might have actually talked about this off air. But I remember roughly telling you how showing you a photo of what the Nightmare Child was meant to look like based off recent additions to canon, in the books and such. And it's basically just a
Oh
stupid
yeah,
Dalek.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
god
Yeah.
damn it. I mean, again, I think I mentioned this before, but if I didn't, even Batman Marge, another great Doctor Who YouTuber who specialized in making like stop motion adventure stories, he did an Eighth Doctor TV series essentially, and he did an episode about the Gates of Elysium, and he did it so much better. You don't even see the Nightmare Child, but what you briefly glimpse of, it's a monster that's terrifying, and it's like, god damn it, how can people who just do this for a passion do so much better than the people who are paid to do it? God damn it.
Hmm.
But sorry, detour aside now, back to the Rani. So she created weapons of mass destruction for the Time Lords, And over time, as the war progressed and got progressively terrible and dangerous, that badder, um, these weapons were also starting to be
Worse.
worse. Sorry, yeah, thank you. These weapons were also gradually being used against the Time Lords as well. Basically, those any Time Lord who went against the will of the High Council and Rassilon. So there could be some level of empathy that you could push there, maybe. But the point is that her weapons were getting out, the handling of her weaponry was getting out of control. And then, after the Doctor saved Gallifrey, that was it. The war was over, but not for her. Again, I could be getting her character completely wrong in all this based off that, but how this concept continues. Essentially, she becomes very delusional and scarred from her time in the war and what she ended up doing. She's because I imagine she would still like be very proud of her achievements. But let's face it, with what everything happened during the war, there's no way anyone would walk away being not somewhat haunted by what they saw and what they did. So, what happens from here is that she, after witnessing and doing such terrifying and cruel things during the war, she feels confident that the war is not won. So she now continues to create monsters and weapons that will ensure the survival of her race, or of herself at least, regardless of the consequences that will endure towards other galaxies and planets throughout the universe.
So it's sort of like the opposite. So yeah, it's sort of like the opposite of the first one we talked about, where there was this Time Lord that wanted to like destroy all of the Time Lords, and this is like the Rani is trying to save the Time Lords again, but her creations are like killing it. I guess would her creations be like killing things other than Time Lords, but she wouldn't care because she only cares about her own race.
It would, I guess, it would be more of a sense of self-preservation for herself and theoretically her people. But yeah, I imagine that
Yeah.
the concept goes that she's basically still fine-tuning the perfect race. So all these monsters you see in the early parts of the story narrative where the Doctor encounters them for the first time, they're like the prototypes, or they're like the failed experiments. So they're not even the final one.
Have you watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yet?
I have, yes.
This is the High Evolutionary.
I won't deny that it was somewhat influenced by that. But at the same time, this actually was.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this sounds very similar to that.
Yeah, but I won't deny that this actually was written before I saw the film.
Oh wow, nice. So you predicted. I hate when that happens. Like you have a really cool idea, and then you watch something. It's like, damn it, I've stolen my idea without knowing. But yeah, so it's similar to that, but like Doctor Who. But what I sort of thought of when you were sort of describing it is like the Frankenstein's monster type thing, where like this mad scientist is stitches all these things together to make a monster. So that was one thing I thought of. And the other thing is a bit darker and in real life. So during World War II, like Nazi scientists would like fuck up, like basically I think it would be Jewish people in like experiments that were like sort of sanctioned by Hitler to like make. I don't know what the purpose was, but it was fucked up. That's as far as I know. I think that was actually the backstory to Nazi zombies on Call of Duty. But anyway, like Nazi experiments where it's like just the worst possible stuff. It sounds very similar to that as well. This pitch.
You're not.
And also, if you said I don't know if that's exactly her motives, but if she only cares about her race and herself, it is very similar to the Nazis.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you're not wrong. There's all the parallels do make sense,
and it makes sense for a villain in Doctor Who to be based off the Nazis, just like the Daleks.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So
it's like in the history of Doctor Who.
So yeah, that's the basic pitch there. And with how this goes, I think this would be a cool storyline just to reintroduce the Rani, because at this point it's no, you can't deny it, it's become a bit of a joke among the fandom where every time we get a somewhat new cast member introduced, and if they happen to be a certain look or a certain type, people immediately think that's the Rani. That's got to be the Rani. If it's time related, it's got to be the
Yeah.
Rani. And this has gone as far back as like the Russell era, because if you remember, I was doing. I didn't know this about this at all, but I think it was during season 3 when during the commentary for Last of the Time Lords, when the Master's body is being burned, the Master's ring falls out of his pyre, and we see a mysterious hand come and pick it up. And in the commentary for that episode, Russell jokingly says, "The hand of the Rani." And I guess a lot of people really took
Wow.
that to heart
What a
because
tease.
people thought for sure, "Oh, we're going to see the
Yeah.
Rani again." And I think that would have been cool to see her, because it would have
Yeah.
made sense for her to have some involvement in bringing him back.
Yeah, rather than that weird like collection of people in a prison that had some potions that that brought him back. Yeah, it would have been that would have been cool if it was the Ronnie that brought him
Yeah.
back.
Plus, also, Russell would later admit during his I think it's in his book, The Writer's Tale, he basically revealed that if he had introduced the Rani during his tenure, he would have cast Ruth Hanschel in the role, and she's not an actor that I know from anything. She's mostly well known for her works on Broadway, but we've got a face to the character. So, I mean,
Let me have a look. What was her name?
Ruth Henschel. I think she might have been in a show called Doctors or something.
We can. Oh yeah, I vaguely recognise her, but yeah.
Yeah,
not really.
but I mean, she's still in the industry, so I could definitely see. I mean, it's not too late if considering Russell's next era is in the swing now, who's to say he can't revisit this
Yeah.
possible casting decision? But yeah, it's been like, I mean, if you remember back when season 8 was in production, when we saw Missy and we thought, oh, maybe this could be the right.
Missy. Yeah, I was gonna say Missy.
Yeah. This is another bit of a fun fact here. When they were filming Dark Water, Peter Capaldi and Michelle Gomez, they were mouthing their lines, I think, so they could not spoil what they were talking about. And during Missy's reveal as the Master, Gomez was actually mouthing the Rani, and that was to basically to hide the identity.
Really?
So those people who were there on location and saw that, who could read lips, I guess, they were going crazy.
Yeah.
I can imagine so.
Wow, that's funny.
And again, another example of what if. And who knows? Like maybe it could have been better, but can't deny it's been on fans' minds for a long time for the Rani to be reintroduced. And I mean, who knows? It still could happen. It's just a matter of if the studio, if Russell and the team can get their hands on the rights to the character, because I believe it's with the Pip and Jane Baker estate now, the people who created the character in the first place.
Really?
Yeah. So
wow.
they would have to get permission to use the character.
Maybe that's why the Ronnie hasn't been on like yet, because they literally can't do it.
Probably that. So at the same time, I imagine if they had a storyline, they could have gone to them, and provided the money they give them would have been enough. I think they could have. So it's probably a factor of a mixed factor of that, where every showrunner previously have just not had the interest to explore the character, and as they don't have the rights to them, it's just encouraged them to try other things, which you've got to admit is commendable. If you don't have access to a certain thing, work with what you do have. But at this point, it's been like over 10 years since Who came back in the revival era, and the fact that we've been like. The fact that Gallifrey itself has been like underused in so many ways now, it's almost like an add-on to that. Where, come on, give the fans something that they've somewhat been eager for years at this point. Give us Gallifrey, give us the Rani, give us something. Because again, over time, it does start to. I mean, they'll fall into their own trap of just reusing stuff they've done before. Look what happened with Gallifrey's destruction with Gibnall.
Oh my god, yeah. That was lazy, but we probably talked to death about that already.
So yeah, that concludes the Rani segment, and we've got to the last two here. The last one is very short and simple, so I'll get to that at the end. But this next one is actually something that I don't think we would ever see, because this would teeter on the edge too much of basically revealing a lot about the Doctor. But would you like to read the title for this one?
Family and friends united.
Reunited.
Reunited.
So again, I somewhat re-edited the title for this one so as not to spoil you. But this is actually the Doctor's family.
I know! I know who it is. I know who it is. Maisie Williams. No, that wasn't who she was. Susan. Is it Susan?
You're on the money, and then some.
Yeah, boy.
Because the basic concept I have here is that the Doctor finally decides to fulfill his promise to reunite with his granddaughter Susan. However,
Yay. Finally.
but this action also ends up bringing him into the path of several other familiar faces that he's known throughout his lives. And in basic summary here, this arc would resolve every existing fate that of every character connected to the Doctor and Gallifrey. So you probably won't know a few of these names, but the Doctor had companions like Leela, a savage from an alien planet,
Oh, yeah.
and she actually was the companion who
I know about
met
Leela.
K9 for the first time, K9 Mark 1.
Nice.
And she travelled with the Fourth Doctor for a while, but then she left, and after she fell in love with a Time Lord on Gallifrey, and basically decided to stay on the planet and live out her life with on Gallifrey. And there's also the Doctor's other companion, Romana, who travelled with the Fourth Doctor. She had several regenerations. She was in two incarnations during her time before she left to live in another parallel universe with another K9. And in expanded media, she returned during the Time War, and for a time was actually acting president and then president of Gallifrey for a period.
Nice.
Among those few and a few others, I think, and Susan, they're all connected to Gallifrey in some form. Their fates are pretty much in the dark when it comes to what happened to them after the Time War. As I'm saying, the bulk of this storyline would be. I wouldn't say it's like the main big storyline. This could probably be a side storyline, maybe. I'll come up with a more exciting one. But the main gist of this one is that the story would resolve every fate of every character that we knew connected to Gallifrey, and it would basically leave everyone off in good places. So with Leela, this is probably me being too like optimistic and like hopeful for the future. But at this point, I'm like, come on, give us some happy endings, because a lot of the stuff that's happened recently has just been terrible. And for Leela's case, I would like to think that she would like spend her last few years on Gallifrey just in peace, in living in a peaceful location with her husband in probably the wilderness or something. And she probably has some kids and grandkids. Maybe one of her kids or grandkids could go off on further adventures with K9, Mark 1. And maybe that could be a little nod to potential spin-offs, but probably wouldn't. But yeah, I imagine Leela, that would be Leela's ending after she maybe has some time adventuring with the Doctor in this storyline, and then it ends with her, retiring. With Romana, I'd like to think they would recast her because they could say it's a future, another incarnation, or maybe they could bring the actress back if they're still around or still acting. But the point is, Romana would be the new president of Gallifrey since Rassilon was exiled in season 9. And that, again, I feel that's a fitting place for her to be in, considering she trusts the Doctor and she's a reliable character herself. So I can imagine her being the future president for many seasons going forward after this.
Yeah, that sounds like, yeah. Because before we were talking about like the Doctor trying to like make Gallifrey better than he found it again, and then and then putting her in as the president would be like a nice end for both of those stories.
Exactly. And going to the Doctor himself and Susan, as you expect, they basically reunite, and he apologizes for taking so goddamn long in seeing her again. And through the drama and the everything that goes on with that, in the end he offers her the chance to come and travel with him again. And this is really dependent on how this storyline would go if it was to be the case, if it did happen. If she said yes, we could get several seasons with them going on adventures. Would be quite fun. Would definitely feed into the family adventure narrative, which I think would be quite fun and interesting and unique, considering she would be a new companion essentially. But yeah, alternatively, if they want to get the actress back, and she prefers to not, do a long multiple run of seasons with a new actress as well, I can imagine her just saying no. I'm quite happy, and she chooses in the end to retire on Gallifrey. Because again, giving a bit of backstory here, after she left, well, after the Doctor left her on Earth in the 51st century, I believe, or it was like sometime in the future. But after he left her on Earth, and she basically lived her life on Earth, she married David. She had a family. She had a son which was introduced in the Big Finish series, and I won't go into detail, but essentially, she's now probably the same age as like the actress who played her herself. So and likely still in her first incarnation. But the point is, she's lived a life on Earth, and now her husband's passed away of old age, and her son's no longer around. So she has no need to go back to Earth now. It's all in the past. So she decides to retire and live out her last few years of this incarnation, or maybe her future generations on her home planet. Yeah, I feel like that for Susan. I just feel like, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, that is just such a final approach to it that I think would be fitting and conclusive. Because I know people would like to say that, oh, you shouldn't make anything too final because then people think it's going to be the end. But I feel like at this point you should, because there's so many. We are approaching a point where so many of these actors who could return, they're not, and they haven't been given the chance to. Because let's face it, they're all getting old, and I feel like to some, and especially to us who love these characters so much, and also considering the fact that in a lot of entertainment right now, all of these legacy characters that we grew up loving have been poorly handled and given terrible endings. I feel like for these few who are still around and have the chance to come back for one last hurrah, it would be nice to know that yes, they had this ending, and it wasn't dark, it wasn't depressing, it wasn't cruel. It was just they struggled, they suffered, but in the end, they ended up in a better place, and now they're happy to live out their last few years in peace. And for Susan, that could be a great return storyline. I could imagine her coming back, having some adventures with her grandfather again, or just coming back for one last adventure hurrah. In the end, she decides to retire and be peaceful. I think that would be so nice, in my opinion.
The only thing I can think of with these particular stories is that, like, for me and for a lot of the modern audiences for Doctor Who, is that they're not going to know who these characters are, so they might not really care, and that's probably why they haven't brought them back and brought the actors back and all this sort of stuff, just because we don't really like want to see them. Like I don't really, if it was or wasn't, I wouldn't really mind. And like the thing is with like characters like Sarah Jane that they brought back, like that worked. But then they've done it other times. It just really hasn't. Like it was a really real one-off with Sarah Jane. And like when in the Chibnall thing, when they like the like, most recent episode, they brought back every single person. I literally didn't care about any of them. And I guess some like classic, watchers do care, but that's not as many as it used to be within the RTD era, though. I don't think.
In fairness, I know you'd say that, but at the same time, I'd like to think of how this concept is approached, because I mentioned that this would be like a season-long thing. So I can imagine that it could work, and it would work if the audience was basically introduced to them themselves. So, because we know, even if you don't know the big strokes of the classic stuff, you know that the Doctor had a granddaughter based off the few mentions he's given to her throughout the eras of the New Who timeline. We even see a photograph of her during the Capaldi era. So it's not like she's a complete stranger at this point. And even Leela, they've had mentions here and there. So New Who fans do have at least a basic of, I vaguely remember this person. At least I'd like to think. So it really is just a matter of how the storyline is handled. Because, as you said, with Chibnall's era, he literally just had them in one episode. It's that one episode where they're somewhat given a bit of backstory about it, and then brushed aside at the next episode likely, because again it's like that one and done story. And if that was to happen, that I think would be terrible, because that's not enough time to give these characters a introduction, establishment, and send off. But if it was to be like a full on
Well,
series,
I disagree because with school reunion, that if they'd have left it there and hadn't had Sarah Jane come back, that would have worked perfectly, because it did work perfectly. It was one episode where she was in the episode and then they ended it as like at the end. They didn't need to carry on, but they chose to because it worked. But they people like Sarah Jane and people like that episode, and how the character worked, and there was enough backstory because it was one character. But with the Chibnall one, it was literally all the ones that were still alive. So yeah, that didn't work because of that. But I think if they, it could work if they focus on one character in the story. I just think when you said about the references, like in the Capaldi era, it was just references, and that was mainly just for like Easter eggs for classic fan, but it wasn't like to cement their characters in everyone's brains so they can bring them in. I think that was just as a reference. And also, if I did have a think about this with Susan, they could get the actress who played Susan in Adventure in Space and Time, because they look exactly the same and it's the same age. So what they could do is they could the Doctor could return like the day after the first Doctor left, and I think that'd just be a funny thing where it's like, oh, you didn't take too long. It's like, well, I've died many times, or it, or should I say, also it wouldn't be the same dynamic unless it was an actor like Peter Capaldi as the Doctor and Susan was a younger actress. For it to be the granddaughter relationship, it'd be weird if it was Peter Capaldi, Ncuti Gatwa, who's 30 but he looks younger, with an actress who's older than him, and it's like, yes, that's my granddaughter. It's like, I don't believe it.
maybe. I guess it really would depend on if he's a good enough actor to pull off a world-weary father figure to this other character. With what you said about the,
But also, I think, sorry, just quickly, I think this stuff works as like Big Finish, but maybe not in the actual main series.
I get it, but in my opinion, no Big Finish, because they've been given all the cool stuff. I want this stuff to be on TV, because that when it's on TV, it's another thing entirely. It's like cemented canon, and I feel like audiences are owed to see certain resolutions to storylines and characters. With what you said about the one episode thing, I do concede that is something they can do it in a single episode, but they have to be so well written. And in Chibnall's era, as an example, it's been terrible. Hence why I felt strongly that they couldn't do it. So I feel like it would be better to do it as a season long thing. And yeah, I gotta admit, I can understand your point of view, but at the same time, I would strongly suggest that I think it could be done. They could pull it off, and I mean, just giving you a bit more of a, I'd like to think a bit of a pathway here. I could see like Susan's introduced early in the season, like episode 2 maybe. I'm just picturing like a 10 episode season here, roughly. But we'd have like Susan introduced in the second episode or the first, and we basically given the rundown. We know, we find out who this is, what's happened since then, and maybe they're trying to find Gallifrey together. Maybe they're just trying to go off on an adventure that's connected to Gallifrey, and then in like a 5 part or 3 part final, more likely, we're introduced to all the other characters. We're given their basic rundown. They help tie into the big storyline of the season, and in the end, that's when it wraps up, and they all go their separate ways, and they have their happy resolutions. I feel like you could definitely do that in a season event, and I think that could be done, in my opinion.
I mean, like I said before, I just don't think it would be something that many people would want. Like, I understand you wanted to see it, and classic fans would want to see it, but like me listening to it, I don't like. This isn't something that I would ever want to see, and I genuinely don't think they would ever do it. Just because it wouldn't. I don't think it'd be popular for people, like the audiences now to watch it. I don't think it would be popular enough to do it. That's why I say it'd be something that would they do as a Big Finish, because that's what the Big Finish audience is audiences that like classic stuff. But but I just really, and especially with Russell, I don't see them doing it at all. Like, I don't. I can easily see if none of these characters ever return.
Mm. Fair enough. Fair enough. But to add a bit more on, because that's just like a lot of the returning established characters. There is another character that would factor into this hypothetical storyline, and this is something where I would think teeters on the edge of like, oh, it could be amazing, or it could be like heavily controversial, even though it does have some level of like history with, not TV canon, and that would be the introduction of the Doctor's brother.
The nurse, no. Um, who's I have not. Who's the Doctor's brother?
So in Doctor Who, I believe it's the novels. I know he's been in some audiobooks as well, but in expanded Doctor Who canon, the Doctor has like several family members and such, and one notable one is a brother, his older brother, called, I believe I'm butchering this terribly, but I'll try my best, Ivering Braxil, or Braxitil. But he's a Time Lord who maintained the Braxitil collection. Just imagine it's some form of Gallifreyan collection archive or something. And he was also notable for holding several high offices on Gallifrey, including the title of Chancellor, Cardinal, sorry, Chancellor, and for a time President. So he's basically a very powerful political figure among Gallifrey. And in my professional story here, I basically just envisioned it being, oh, let's tease something cool, interesting for the Doctor's backstory, but let's not go give the whole like story, because again, that's why we complain so much about the Timeless Child retcon and everything with that. I don't want to know about the Doctor's origin, and if, again, in my head, as I've said before, I always imagine the Doctor having a very simple, childhood. I imagine him just being this. Again, I've said this before already, but I'll just reiterate it for this episode, I guess. In my head, the Doctor was just a young lad who grew up with a family, had a family of his own, and then once he got to an old age and he had his grandchild, he realised this isn't for me. Life in Gallifrey, all this stuff about potential like political drama and the career paths, it's just not for me. I want to see what's out there. As he just went off into the universe, and I imagine that's just it. That's his origin. Nothing nefarious. Nothing like, oh, you are a chosen figure, secret hidden from the world. No, he is just a Time Lord who wants to see the universe. And I feel like, how can you do something with that without exploiting that? You can more imply it, and I feel like it's definitely within realm for them to make it more canon. The idea that, oh, the Doctor had a brother too, and this brother was essentially the complete opposite of the Doctor, because he revelled in the politics side of Gallifrey. He made it his career path essentially. And I mean, who doesn't, who has a friend or has a brother themselves, who cannot relate to that, where they took a different career path that is something you wouldn't be able to do, but they revel in it. And again, I don't know if this is like true to canon, but in my hypothetical pitch here, they would clash on and off as brothers do, but in the end, they hold each other in high regard and do care for each other deeply. And this is a quote I'm borrowing from Doctor Who Wiki here. He's being quoted as saying that he missed his brother, but he knew he was always out there. And that is what he believed was real family should be. And this is another quote from Doctor Who Wiki. He also believed, during the last Great Time War, that he would never see his brother again. So I could imagine a future season, the Doctor, again, with this entire thing going on, he returns to Gallifrey, or he returns with his granddaughter, and he meets his brother again after all this time. And I can imagine it being a very nice reunion, and it could lead into a storyline that could get tense, get very like drama filled, but at the end of the day, he's still his brother, he still cares for him, and he knows that you're gonna go out there, you're gonna see the universe, fine. But I'm staying here, I know where my priorities are, and I know you're out there, so I know you'll be fine. I feel like that's a cool approach. I think we could that could be realized on screen. And yeah, what do you think of that?
I actually like that idea a lot, and it does remind me a bit of the like dynamic between Sherlock Holmes and Mycroft Holmes, in Sherlock, where like Sherlock is his own freelance detective stuff, and Mycroft is like in the head of the government, and like he's very strict, but they do love each other. It's like very similar to that, and I do like that idea. And you're right with the like the Doctor seems to be the sort of, and I never actually considered this before because what you said about the first Doctor, it does make a lot of sense that like he grew up, had kids, and they had grandkids, and then was old, and that was what William Hartnell was, and he hadn't regenerated yet, so he was old, and then he regenerated and became young and did all this stuff like that. Actually, I never considered that before, and it's weird to think about because it's like the Doctor being like a father, like even though like he says a lot that he used to be a father, I don't really think about it too much. So that's quite interesting. And like obviously he had family in their Time Lord, so they've got to have a lot of like I'd imagine big families of like and to have a brother would make sense. And yeah, it wouldn't take away from the Doctor's origin at all because the Doctor obviously he had family. So I think that's a really cool addition to have. But like I'd imagine when they if this brother was in it, they'd have to cast someone who I think would look similar to the current Doctor, just because I think it would you'd even though like the time was always supposed to change, I think it would be good for the audiences to see similarities between the two actors.
Maybe I think it would be quite funny if they ended up casting someone who was like the spitting image, not the same actor, but they were very similar to a previous incarnation.
Oh sure,
So
yeah,
we could get an actor who is almost like very similar to Christopher Eccleston or Paul
yeah,
McGann because I do know from the few photos and stills of and because the character's mostly been portrayed in books and audiobooks, so just by voice. But there has been like several promotional photos of actors, the voice actors, and all that such, and a lot of them just picture him as being this very traditional British gentleman, sometimes with a moustache, sometimes with very slick back hair, almost like Sherlock Holmes.
mm, yeah.
So, but I can imagine. I mean, how funny would it be if and ironic if Benedict
Benedict
Cumberbatch
Cumberbatch,
played the character?
yeah. I was thinking Mark Gatiss
Maybe, but then that would be a bit of a plot hole.
because he likes to include himself.
Yeah, yeah.
Nah, he's been in it like 5 times already. So
Oh yeah, true. But again, it's just like you weren't you Lazarus once, and weren't you like General Lethbridge Stewart?
weren't you the Brigadier? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
and the Master. I think has he been the Master in an
I
audiobook,
think he was the
or was he the
master in
Doctor?
an
One
Unbound
of the
Doctor Who canon story once.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. And I think he played even though he didn't need to be in it, but I think he played John Pertwee in Adventure in Time and Space, so that all three Doctors were there, and he
yeah,
was the third one.
yeah. He wasn't in the special, but he made a tongue in cheek
Yeah,
photo shoot with the two actors.
yeah.
I think it was recreating the poster or something for the first
For
10-year
the three,
anniversary special.
yeah, because Reece Shearsmith was Patrick Troughton, and Reece Shearsmith and Mark Gatiss like went to university together, and like they did the League of Gentlemen and stuff like that.
Hmm,
So like they're friends. So that was just something funny. But
interesting.
yeah, back to the brotherly thing.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be cool to get an actor like that in the role. At the same time, it would be up to the showrunner, I guess, if this was to ever happen. But yeah, with concluding this story segment, I feel like this would be the perfect way to end it, where the High Council is made anew by people who are reliable and have the better interest for Gallifrey going forward. Romana's the president. All the companions have of that who were on Gallifrey, we know they're alive and they've either to be able to either retire or they're able to go off on their own and continue to have adventures or just like live their lives. And with Braxel, he's like part of the new High Council, and I just want to add this on because I think this is a cool way they could like keep him around, where he's a part of the High Council now, so he's like Romana's like second hand man. Like he's like most reliable ally, her most reliable ally on the council. So I imagine that she would send him out to do missions, or to at the very least relay information to the Doctor. Because we, if I don't know if you know this, if you've seen any of these stories with I'm just thinking of Genesis of the Daleks as an example, but in that story, the Doctor is just like brought to Skaro, and a Time Lord is just there saying, "Doctor, we've brought you to this planet because so and so. We want you to do this. Good luck." And I think they did a similar thing with John Pertwee during the Master's first story in Terror of the Autons, where a Time Lord came to him and said, "The Master's here. You better do something," and he pops off. So I can imagine them revisiting that concept, where after they introduce Braxel and his ties to the Doctor in this storyline, this season, they could then bring him back in future seasons in a guest role, where he's just like, "Oh, we've got this storyline about this team of rogue Time Lords, assassins. They've been sighted in the Benton galaxy, and we want to let you know that they're causing trouble. You should probably do something about it because the Gallifrey, we're very busy right now. We're still trying to recover from the war."
What? Yeah, yeah, that's actually really cool concept. Like, because like I said, I think I've said before, I'd love it if Gallifrey returned as like a constant, a recurring place with some recurring characters, and to have the like this new, maybe a new incarnation of the Rani, and then the Doctor's brother as like these two recurring characters that he visits, and yeah, like gives him basically quests to do, would be really cool. And then like, and maybe like they could change Gallifrey, so like Gallifrey is like, or like the Time Lords aren't supposed to intervene, but the Doctor does. So maybe it's like they still hold on to their like classic roots of not intervening, but the Doctor's brother is literally the High Council, so like he's like just sneaking the Doctor some information, like, we're not going to do anything, but if you want, you go over there. There might be something for you over there, so they can be involved without actually being involved, because like they don't count the Doctor as like as in their like order sort of thing.
I agree. I feel like that's a perfect way to go with the narrative. And yeah, that's the last big concept pitch. And so I know I've already asked what do you think about a few segments of it, but as a collective, just like as a last little one, what would you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I like literally. This is the one that I don't like. I said it already, that about the some of the classic people returning, but I mean, classic people return all the time, so it could work. It might not, but it's all wish fulfillment, isn't it? But I do really like the ideas of like the like rogue assassin or the renegade assassins, like having to track down the Doctor and Rassilon. I do like that, and I back to, and to the first one about like the like crazy mad Time Lord who might be possibly a monster. That I do think that's a cool idea as well. But yeah, basically I just want Gallifrey to return as a planet and not be destroyed, and not be the main, like the just in the finale as like, this is a thing that we can sort of scrape, but we're not going to actually delve into it properly. I just want Gallifrey to return properly, and like maybe have some recurring characters on it as well.
Me too, mate. Me too. But yeah, that's that segment done, and the last one is simple and quick. This one's called New Friend, Same Home. And if it wasn't obvious already, this entire pitch would basically be a simplified: the Doctor returns to Gallifrey, meets a Time Lord, likely a Time Lady, because it's been a tradition to always be a girl companion at this point, and takes her on as his new companion to show the universe. And it's as simple as that. I feel like if they're not going to do anything big with Gallifrey, they might as well try something that was interesting and done before, which was introduce a new companion who is a Time Lord. And they did that with Romana, and she was a very popular character for a generation of Whovians. And yeah, I feel like it's not against the rules for them to try that again a second time. And I mean, who knows? They could put. I think we actually touched on this before about potential companions. I feel like it would be quite interesting to have a companion who is basically very similar to the Doctor in not just their species, but just in their longevity, experience wise, and maybe they had a similar thing where they're getting dull with everything going on in Gallifrey. At the same time, it's also a very simplified plot line, so I can imagine it being just not that interesting for them to do or tackle. But again, it all really does depend on what
Uh,
story they want to
when I imagine a Time Lord, yeah, exactly. But when I imagine the Time Lord companion, I don't know why, but I think of it as similar dynamic that Rose was, where like the Doctor and Rose went on all these adventures and they sort of just became besotted with each other. So if the Doctor and the Time Lord companion, not I'm not saying maybe romantically, but like the Doctor and has a finally has a actual friend who's a Time Lord, they can go on adventures together, but they just because they both live for so long, they just never stop, and it's like you can imagine like this would be like a similar to how Rose was a really special companion to the Doctor. So if this one maybe goes or dies, it's a really big impact because it's like family and a Gallifreyan. So it's a proper like it'll be a proper like sting if this character ends up like having a really tragic end. Just because it's a Time Lord rather than a human, so that this person is supposed to have a long life.
Yeah, I do feel like expanding on a bit here. I feel like this is in this hypothetical storyline, it would have to be like the next big, event for the Doctor in his life with feelings and all that. Because he had Rose, then he had River Song, and even before that, he had his like first family. And just to add on a bit here, in my head canon, I personally do believe that the Doctor's wife, the actual Doctor's first wife, that we will hopefully never see one day. Hopefully we never see her. I hope I like to think that she passed away, and that somewhat contributes with his desire to travel the universe because he didn't want to stay on his home planet.
Oh yeah.
So, be reminded of her. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe that's a element of a story that's one day going to be explored, but I hope they don't. But yeah, I like to think that the Doctor had his first wife, and that's why he was able to like catch feelings with Rose and then with River. So to have a companion, a new Time Lord companion come in, if it is to develop into a romance, it would have to be like a very big thing that would like last multiple seasons. And as you said, then it would conclude with the character likely being killed off, because that would be like a big event to remember and recollect back to. And I think also because if you just keep her alive and she leaves or like goes back to Gallifrey, it's not that interesting, and two, it feels very well, for one thing, it feels very safe, and also it kind of feels like oh she's abandoning the Doctor, especially after all they've been through together. If they are romantically involved, whereas if she's killed off, that not only is that more tragic, but it gives motivation for the Doctor to stop whatever was responsible for hurting her and killing her.
Hmm. Which might be some sort of unnatural creature from across the universe.
Maybe it's as simple as the Master, maybe it's as simple as the Daleks, but maybe it could be something wholeheartedly new and more dangerous, and something that the viewers would be really eager to see more of, especially if it's a new villain that's we've never seen before. It's
Maybe it could be tied back to the villains we were talking about, like the Time Lord esque villains, and that like that's how she dies is because she gets killed by some sort of Time Lord with like maybe the Renegades with like the weapons that stop regenerations or something like that. So that's a even more impact rather than just being some random creature. It'd be a Time Lord related incident, maybe.
yeah, yeah. The possibilities are endless. There, it is there to see. And yeah, that's the discussion for today. Gotta say, mate, this was a good one.
Lovely. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I always like talking about like hypotheticals.
Me too, mate. And who knows? Maybe there's a slim chance, but maybe we're somewhat on the money. Maybe a showrunner has got this. Maybe Russell, maybe himself, or maybe even a future showrunner. Maybe they've got one or two of these ideas burning at the back of their head too, and maybe we could see this come to fruition one day. Or maybe they might just see this
I
video.
hope so. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Well, time will tell, mate.